Well, Mike Hobart, thank you for joining us. We're trying to get something scheduled too for a while, but yeah, man, glad you could show up.
I appreciate the interest in just wanting to have a conversation with me.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's always good, and you have done some things in the mining space, and you ride a lot. So want to hear about some of that stuff too, but also just kind of your backstory, and you guys both being military folks.
Yeah,
you can give us some insight on what the Bitcoin feel is within kind of the services. Is there a big contingency of Bitcoiners in there? Because I feel like if they understood it more, they would be.
In my circles, I don't think any of them have paid attention to it whatsoever.
Really?
I would say that the interest, particularly within the veteran community, is spreading and growing pretty rapidly.
I think so too.
And I think a lot of that is also going to be because of events and decisions that have been made in the last 3 years, in particular, with regards to just like military operations, policy decisions, the military trying to figure out why they can't meet recruiting quotas. I wonder why. You know, there's just been a lot of like not smart decision making going on within military leadership, and they just and Jake knows this, like the military, and speaking specifically of my experience with the Army, is not exactly an environment that is conducive to out of the box thinking and creative thought with regards to just like,
no, if anything, it's you're punished for it and it's suppressed. That's
you're contained.
My number one reason for leaving. I mean, outside of like we get paid shit and I don't really want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like why are we doing things the way that we're doing it? If this fucking sucks, it doesn't work, it's inefficient. It's like shut the fuck up.
Yeah, and then they're gonna put you somewhere and then they're just gonna bury you. It's just like within the corporate world.
It's
like if you have a good idea, you get bought out by somebody, they're just gonna shelve you and keep you there, and you're gonna collect dust.
All they want is good soldiers who fall in line.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that maybe it's not funny, but they like to make it out like they are that way, right? Particularly with their recruiters. Like every single veteran you will ever speak to for all of time will despise recruiters because they'll pull out every lie in the book to get you to sign on the dotted line. And then you get in there and you're like, this isn't a place to grow if you're somebody who's willing to challenge just like traditional ways of doing things. And I don't know about you, Jake, but like the drill and ceremony stuff, and particularly the focus on respect the title and respect the rank and not the man. I'm like, I can't. If you hold a high rank and you're an
I'm
idiot.
not a military guy. Like I actually wanted to go into the JAG really badly, and I did get accepted into like, I almost went straight out of high school, didn't do that. And then I got accepted into OCS for the Navy back in like 08, 09, something like that. Before I went to law school. And then during law school, I was wanting to go to the JAG. My ex-wife was not keen on any of that I did, so I ended up not doing it. But yeah, so I don't know like enough about it. I am curious though, because I felt like it would be something like Bitcoin in particular would be something that they would kind of resonate with a lot of troops or veterans in particular. But
your experience is dictated based on, I mean, there's two totally different experiences. If you go to college and you go in as an officer, it's a much different experience. I mean, you still deal with some of the same bullshit that we're talking about. Like that doesn't necessarily go away, but it's still different. The enlisted side is
just, fall in line.
Yeah, it's just and it's, I don't know. What never really sat right with me was like, even the guys who were, and you see this played out. I give so many different stories. Like the 25-year master gunnery sergeant, he's the highest rank on the enlisted side, but he's still outranked by the 2-week.
Butter bar.
Yeah, exactly.
What kind of relationship does that create?
Animosity,
really,
typically.
Yeah.
And it's. I mean,
is there the stereotypical?
The like, by all means, like when I'm like, I know you're the same way. Like, there's still a lot of my guys that I love. Like the unit that I came from was awesome. It's just like, guys, like the structure of the organization that we're within is not conducive to my health and success. So I can't be.
Right. You're not trying to talk negatively about individuals.
Like I'm still in contact with my former commanding officer.
Right.
Like we still chat about a lot of like a couple months ago. I had like a 3-hour conversation with him until like 2 a.m. talking about like all sorts of just crap that's going on in America. That's just not right. But the animosity that like we're talking about with regards to like the example with the Master Gunnery Sergeant and the 2-week butter bar, the good butter bars are going to understand that while you may outrank him, he's going to know more than you, so you should probably shut your mouth and just listen.
Use him as a mentor.
Yeah.
Right? And if you come in, but also like, you know, a Master Guns who's been in for 25 years also knows where you play in this space and kind of what, I mean, you're given a little bit of grace if you're.
It's a good lesson in just like politics, leadership, game theory, like all of that. Strategy.
There's probably some really big douchebag guys that are 2 weeks in that are lieutenants though.
Oh, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But actually I'll dovetail this or bring it back into like the conversation. The military is actually the reason why I even started looking into Bitcoin.
Really? Okay.
So real quick, my background is
I was gonna say, tell us your background.
My background is super, super diverse. I'll add in what we were talking about after the meetup. I spent the majority of my life really heavily into video games. Like I was getting into the pro circuit before MLG was a real thing, like all that other stuff. That was a lot of fun. So like if people want to talk about video games, I can
what kind of games? Give us a list of taste.
Like tactical shooters, like Rainbow Six Vegas was like that was like my game. But I also played like the super nerdy stuff, like MMORPGs, like World of Warcraft. Guild Wars was mine. Like
my son would probably know a lot more what you're talking about than I do.
But anyway, like moving on beyond that, I went to college for exercise science. The reason I even had interest in it was because during that time of my nerdiness and high school and middle school, I was clearly a nerd and kind of regarded as a geek. So I was pretty well not accepted in any social circles. And I was extremely skinny. Like I was 6 foot, like a $120 wet.
Oh dang, dude, that's
like,
skinnier than I was.
I
was really skinny.
My mom would she told me that as a kid she would describe me as the widest part of my legs were my knees.
Oh man. Yeah, no, I get that.
And my dad,
I was like 140. I was so scrawny.
My dad was a power lifter.
Oh wow,
in high school, and he's got a bunch of trophies and stuff. So I went to him and I'm like, hey, can you help me get bigger and get stronger? So then I just started going in hard on like learning as much as I could about like how I can grow muscle, how skinny, high metabolism individuals grow muscle, like all this other stuff. And then I was just like, you know what? I like this a lot. This is a lot of fun. It's helping me. I can potentially help other people. So I'll go to college for it. In the like right as I was wrapping up my junior year, getting prepped for senior year is when deployment came up. Like I think it was probably the last like month or two of my junior year, I got the call. Like the call. It's like, hey, because I was in the National Guard. I got the call. They're like, hey, you're deploying August of 17. You're going to Kuwait. I'm like, ugh. You guys couldn't just like put it off for like one more year so I can get the degree taken care of and not have to like break it up and come back. So as we were preparing for mobilization, I was talking with my mom because she's one of my biggest mentors. And I was like, hey, I need to start figuring out like investment theory and how to put like where to put my money so I can start making money and not like become one of those sob stories for a deployment or a specialist goes on deployment and blows all his money on like marrying a stripper or getting some
or buying an Eclipse.
Or buying a ridiculous car loan from one of the base guys where it's like, hey, buy a Harley Davidson. It's tax free here. Oh, by the way, the interest rate is 25%.
I grew up in I went to high school in a military town. It was next to the Whiteman Air Force Base in Namnasser, Missouri. And like, dude, I knew so many guys. You saw so many like soldiers, like, well, I guess not soldiers, airmen driving around Mitsubishi Eclipses, dude.
Mustangs,
Mustangs,
Chargers.
and freaking Eclipses. That was like all of them did.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so
I digress. My bad.
No, you're good. Because like after, I mean, the story's very basically, well, kind of wrapped up at that point. Because throughout the deployment, I mean, of course they give you, they kind of scare you into believing you're going to be super busy. At least for me, because I wasn't a combat operator. I was an aircraft hydraulics specialist, which like you kind of have to test a little high on like the ASVAB to be able to get into like the aviation realms. And my unit was particularly highly regarded throughout the country as far as like a really high operation rate. And like, I mean, we during our National Guard gets shit on all the time for doing the annual training during the summer, but we would go train with the 160th, like special forces. So it's not like we were completely useless or anything, even though we were National Guard unit. And so while we were out there, we were told we would be looking over 72 aircraft. We got there was 2 Chinooks that were waiting for parts for like months. So we had nothing to do.
Just bored.
Yeah. So I just spent all of my days working out 2 to 3 hours a day and studying Bitcoin for like 4 to 6 hours on average every day while I was on deployment, putting more money into it the more I learned about it. And then of course, a couple months into it is when it did its run up into 20,000 and then came crashing back down. And I was like, oh, this is different.
Yeah.
This is really weird. And then fast forward to the pandemic when we're all locked down and I go on Clubhouse and start just like talking with people about Bitcoin. Like the more Clubhouse grew in popularity, the more people that were interested in Bitcoin. Like it's just kind of like a magnet at that point. That's where I found out about the synergy between Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining and energy. That's what blew my mind. I was like, the money stuff for Bitcoin is cool, but the relationship between Bitcoin mining and power and energy generation and power distribution and that whole game, I'm like, this is what is going to change society first. And then the money stuff will come downstream after people realize that Bitcoin does more than just money.
Like there's a utility to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can argue there's a lot of utility.
Oh yeah, there's a ton. I agree, but that's one that
it's a physically reflected utility.
When people say like Bitcoin's not tangible and you can't touch it, and it's like, no, you can. This is how it's literally a tangible. There's a tangible utility for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the energy infrastructure side of it. But yeah,
that's I seriously, I don't think enough attention is given to like what Bitcoin is going to do, because like oil and gas are going to be some of the biggest benefactors immediately, right? Because like we talk about, I know you guys have had conversations with like Mario and Lisa about specifically like flare gas mitigation. Like just that strategy appeases the oil producers, appeases the environmentalists.
It should.
The climate catastrophists.
It should.
Right? Because more people need to get their eyes open up to the fact that all this climate catastrophe stuff is nonsense, and it's just that. Right? Like, particularly around now, I'm not saying that like methane getting into the atmosphere is nonsense.
Right. There's a difference in saying that it's all like that it's not a propaganda tool. I think a lot of it is, but we all are very conscientious about the operations that we do. Oil and gas companies focus on it all the time. I've worked with some
nobody
big
wants
operators.
to release methane. It's
right.
your product.
Right. You don't want to waste it. Yeah. So it's like, this is nobody wants that.
Yeah.
And so they're constantly looking for ways to achieve a way to economically achieve completely mitigating that issue. And that is where Bitcoin mining steps in. It should appease both sides. And it should be very beneficial.
Yes. And the really crazy part is that while I was working with Great American Mining in 2022 out in the back end basin, or Bakken basin, I always pronounce it wrong. While we had our flare mitigation centers out, you just call them data centers that are being using for flare mitigation. We're out there consuming the methane, like as far as like from the associated natural gas production, right? What we were seeing, what I saw when I started looking at the data when I got brought on, my mind was blown, because they had it, like we had it marked out to where on the chart it would show the production of both oil and natural gas yield. And then we had it marked out to what those numbers looked like or were reflected after we were brought on to the operation.
Mm-hmm.
To the point of where you see the oil production right up where it was before, but then the associated natural gas yield is down by like anywhere from 50 to 90%. So my mind immediately was like, okay, so like in these regulated markets like North Dakota or Colorado, which Colorado's regulations are basically communist in my opinion, where they're like strictly like limiting how much you can flare or vent. Okay, let's play ball. Like let's bring on flare, like digital flare mitigation strategies with data centers. It can be Bitcoin or it can be the HPC high processing compute for AI. I mean, I would recommend Bitcoin because whatever company is doing the AI stuff, they can just decide not to do it anymore. And then all of a sudden you're out of a demand source. But you bring these guys on in these regulated markets. Okay, we have to reduce our emissions by like 92%. We'll consume like 90% of the emissions that are coming out of the ground. And then that opens up a massive opportunity to even like increase your barrel per day production by like 50 to 90% if you wanted. Then all of a sudden you have an additional
You're
line
saying
of
through new drilling? Is that what you're saying?
no, like even like on the operations that are pumping now, like any of the operations that are limited by these regulations because they're flaring or venting too much.
Yeah.
Why not bring on these miners?
Yeah, not having the gas left to bring up the oil.
Yeah, because
Right,
if the flare is the limiting factor,
Yeah, on what you're producing from that.
reduce the flare so that you can still you could even flare at the same rate, but you're consuming more of the gas, so you're getting more because like the gas is coming
so you
because
open up
of
the well more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, why wouldn't you? Because then you're getting an additional line of revenue through the Bitcoin mining, and you're able of increasing your barrel per day production if that's what is desired. Because like, then you have the argument of like, well, do you think that the cost of a barrel of oil is going up? Well, I would argue it is because like demand is now higher than it was in 2019.
Yeah,
and
the cost of materials is definitely more.
Yeah.
Ridiculously more.
And with all the stuff that's going on with renewables, if they really want to try and grow renewable like penetration as far as like energy generation goes, you're going to need a lot of oil to make those solar panels and all that other stuff. Or if you're arguing for like the revitalization of infrastructure in the US for power distribution, you're going to need a boatload of that because the American Society of Civil Engineers gave America's power infrastructure a rating of C+ in 2021. So that's you need oil for all that infrastructure. If you need nuclear, you need oil. Like you need oil for everything. Demand's only going up.
Yeah. No, I think we all would agree on that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised, especially with what's going on in the Middle East, if there's another crunch coming here before too long.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
What do you tell us how you got to GAM? Because GAM was, kind of one of the more well-known names in the off-grid mining space, for a while and fairly early into it. How did you get over? Like, how'd that come about?
So, I think at this point, because GAM got really well known thanks to Marty Bent, right? Like Marty was talking about
who's like the founding team? Is Marty and who else? There's a bunch of wasn't Tom Massey was over there?
Yeah, Tom Massera.
There's
Brad was over there for a while. I love Brad Cuddy, man. He's like one of my
Brad
favorite
Cuddy
dudes.
he was one of my favorites. To be honest, I'm not necessarily sure on who all the founding team was. I know that
Tom's awesome too.
AJ Scalia and Drew Armstrong were there at some point. I believe they were.
It's so funny. That's like
it's like the
GAM Mafia.
Group.
Like they've all gone off and like done even bigger things since then.
Yep.
Yeah.
And and now like those guys, obviously like Marty, Drew, and AJ, they have Cathedra, which is doing a very similar project. And they're like over there killing it from what I understand.
Austin was over there too.
Austin Storms.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a good group, man. That's a bunch of cool dudes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a good group. All those dudes. Drew is honestly one of the smartest dudes in Bitcoin mining.
That's what I hear.
Like, we need to get him on here. I'd he's sharp, dude. He's just cool, you know. He's
Well,
like
they like
East Coast hippie.
those three, Drew, AJ, and Marty just had a podcast together, which they were talking about like all the things that they've learned in the last couple of years.
Is it on Marty's podcast?
Yeah, it's on TFTC.
Yeah.
Okay. But I believe that a lot of that group had kind of like split off, like everybody had kind of like cast to the wind to start doing their own things. And then that's where I was just brought on to kind of do more of the communications and marketing push and just like get out in front of cameras and spaces and individuals and just talk about the utility of flare gas mitigation through Bitcoin mining.
Is that what led into you writing, or were you writing?
No,
already?
I was writing well before that.
Yeah. So how did that get going?
So
you were just doing it independently, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I, going into the pandemic, on top of like the Clubhouse thing, I was like, you know what? I need to start putting just like my thoughts down on paper. Cause like for years I'd been thinking and saying a bunch of things that ended up coming true years later. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to just like have this out there so I can refer back to it and see like, oh, you know, I told you so. Which, you know, call it vanity or whatever, but I wanted to be able to say that I'm not a complete idiot. And I wrote a article about Bitcoin power, like Bitcoin is power. And funny enough, Will Clemente on it is either, I believe it was Will Clement. He had noticed it when I shared it on Twitter, and he's like, hey, I know some guys over at Bitcoin Magazine that might like this if you want to write for him. And that's where I got connected to Tyler LaRoche.
Yeah.
And
I owe him a call too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought his name up. Yeah. He texted me like yesterday or the day before.
And he had hit me up and he asked if I'd be interested in just continuing to like send them things that I write about. And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then I think I put up, I don't know the numbers. I probably put up 30 articles in the first year. And then maybe like the first 18 months. And then like got to the point of where Todd Garland at GAM, he was the CEO at that point. And he had hit me up. He's like, hey, would you be interested in writing a little bit about us, like at Great American Mining? And they flew me out to check out the operations. And because it wasn't just that I wanted to see the operations, it's like, I want you guys to educate me on how like I think I understand it conceptually, but I want to know like the specifics, like the technicalities of like filtering the gas and like all that, and like getting to the point of where it's actually even usable to run through a generator. And then like the game theory and the dynamics of like remotely operating a generator set to make sure it doesn't go down because the flow of gas coming out of a well is inconsistent. So it's just like being able to write about all that. And then
I'll have to go back and read that one.
Todd liked what I produced.
Yeah, it's tough. But so are you still writing for them? And by the way, I do want to say this: Tyler LaRoche and Dylan LeClaire, those are two of the smartest little dudes I've ever met. And it
future is bright for the young.
Are they physically little, or are they just younger than you?
Well, I mean, they're not huge guys either, but they're
not small though.
No, they're not small. They're young.
They're just on their 50s like you.
Right. Like it was really weird. I was talking to both of them for a while about kind of doing some stuff together potentially. And at the time, I'm 42 and they're both 21. And I'm like, shit, man, I'm literally the same age as you two combined. That is
damn
terrible. And I'm like wanting them to come do stuff with me. You know what I mean? It's kind of, when you talk to some of the smart people in this industry, the future is bright, number one, but it's like where they're at compared to where like I was at their age is remarkable. They're so
I was
far
not doing
advanced.
anything remotely intelligent.
No, they're so beyond like where I was. It's ridiculous. I told them that too, but yeah, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, my bad.
No, like that. I mean, it's been basically just a long diatribe of my background. So
no, but I like hearing people's different paths to it because, I think, my fault. I think everybody needs to like understand how you get there because we live in kind of an echo chamber on Twitter. Which I've gotten away from completely.
I really don't ever log in.
Yeah,
that's healthy.
It is healthy. But you know, for a long time, it felt like it was just kind of the same people with the same story, and I don't think that there's enough people that are outside of it that can feel like they can relate all the time, because it is kind of a closed off group. And so that's why, to me, it's important that people that write about stuff kind of, how did you get here? Because people are going to read your stuff. You're in Bitcoin Magazine, you know what I mean? That's the probably the most popular or well-known periodical, even though it's kind of more online, but that people would read.
Well, it's like my biggest thing with like my writing, because I also have my own Substack, which for anybody that's interested is like justhearmeout.substack.com. My biggest thing is that, and it's one of the pain points with Bitcoin Magazine, where I prefer to have the long form because the things I like to talk about are extremely complex.
Like how long are we talking?
Like anywhere from 3,000 to 7,000 words.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's most people do not want to read that much. But and honestly, like I don't really care. Like I'm sorry. Like I get that you want to read just like quick snippets, but the things that I want to talk about are extremely complex, and you need, if I'm gonna break things down to a simple absorbable idea, there has to be a lot of steps in between. Like when we're talking about oil and gas production, say for example, like I wrote I think it was somewhere between 3,000 and 7,000 words. I have a series of essays on my Substack where I wrote that like Bitcoin is the solution to the energy problem. And I focus specifically on oil and natural gas, like talking about how natural gas hasn't been invested in for the last couple of decades. And the Iowa Law Review did this paper back in 2015 suggesting that we needed like 96,000 miles worth of pipes, like to be able to facilitate all this stuff. And it's like, well,
I was gonna say, you talking about natural gas transportation, or yeah, because I'll tell you, go look at the Haynesville. There's a shit ton of money there.
But the thing is that like since that time, the amount of natural gas that we export has like, I don't know, 5-6x'd. It's like, okay,
yeah, it's
so
up a lot.
We might have met that like quota as far as like the pipelines, but like when we're pushing 5-6x more product, is it like, is it facilitating it? Like that was just a question that I brought up. But or like writing about how I have another article about how I think the fiat economic system is contributing to the stress problem, which is contributing to the testosterone problem in the male population. Like I wrote about that.
That's interesting. I'll have to read that one too.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan just said, who did he talk with about that? He was talking to somebody about the or no, maybe it wasn't Joe Rogan. Maybe it was Chris Williamson on his podcast.
He has a lot of good ones
on the testosterone.
Y'all look kind of similar, so that works out.
Yeah,
but it's just testosterone, like natural testosterone.
It's crazy.
It's just
what is it?
plummeting.
Something like the average 25-year-old has like the testosterone of like a 60-year-old from like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, something like that. It's not that long.
It's all factors that we can control.
Oh yeah,
diet, exercise, lifestyle.
Isn't that freaking crazy though? It's kind of scary.
It is nuts.
Like,
well, and
we're all getting neutered.
Yeah,
and another thing that I've written about is that like, so on the fitness front, if we want we're dealing with a public health crisis right now in the U.S. with, I think by 2030 it's projected that 70% of the population is going to be at least obese.
God, dude.
Like something like that.
But then they make it seem like if you want to work out and you like try to take care of yourself, that you're some type of freaking chauvinist.
Fascist.
Yeah, like it's like, wait.
Oh,
what?
I mean,
when did that change though? Because it wasn't that long ago.
That
it was
is a
like,
thing, but also like let me play devil's advocate here. Fitness has now become more popular than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
yeah.
It's a necessity.
Right.
You know what I mean? But like think about like all the fitness influencers and how like there's this like, I don't know, working out kind of.
But
like,
then how's the population going to be 70% obese then?
So they're
because that's not that's not outpacing. Obesity is still outpacing.
Food issue. Yeah.
They're both growing, but obesity is growing
and our
much
food
faster.
Is shit here.
Yeah, you touched on that because I wanted to bring it up. There's two problems with the whole fitstagram nonsense that's happening. A lot of those individuals are not doing it naturally.
Yeah. There was it Osmoprec or some.
No, there's Ozempic, which is the diabetes drug that people are using.
That's not it. Oh, is that what they're using to lose weight?
Elon Musk was using it to lose weight, and I'm like, not a smart move. But like a lot of
I saw they were testing it on like 6-year-olds.
Yeah. No, don't do that. But a lot of the fitness influencers are like juicing with like testosterone.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's TRT for like the guys that are in their 40s and up. It's like, I'm not going to judge you by all means, guys. Like, take the TRT. But if you're 21,
Yeah. What are you doing it for?
Stop it.
Yeah.
But the other problem with the food,
that's always been a thing though.
Yeah.
Since like the 70s, right?
Especially
you
when
look at like the muscle mags and now everybody's open about it. Like even like Phil Heath, who was like, 7-time Mr. Olympia and stuff. While he was wasn't talking about it. Now that he's retired, talks openly about it, and so does everybody else, right?
Well, yeah.
And everybody had always known, but
yeah.
Well, I mean, and like the access to media and social media in particular.
Pardon me while I drink my energy drink.
Yeah, it's just like feeding
where I think that becomes criminal, in my opinion, and then we'll get back to the topic, is the Liver King. Right, and so you're selling ancestral supplements, right? And you're saying that your entire look is based on that when you have $11,000 a month, performance enhancing.
Gosh, is that what he was spending?
Yeah, and like mostly on like
growth,
you
should look up
growth and IGF.
More plates, more dates. Derek did a breakdown of like what all he was taking, and it was just really, but anyway. The food topic is something that I like to really bring up with regards to people that are like looking to improve their health and their fitness. There's an issue in the US with regards to the quality of the food that we have.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's like, say, so I'm going to plug a friend of mine. I'm sure you guys have probably know of him or heard of him. It's Texas Slim with the Beef Initiative.
Yeah,
he's spreading around a lot of good information on like America's sourcing of beef and the fact that a lot of it's actually coming from Brazil, and like the stuff we're producing is being sold elsewhere because we can get a premium on it. There's also problems with which Texas Slim pointed me to, and I like went down the rabbit hole as far as like the quality of the soil. Industrialized monocropping destroys the quality of the soil to the point of where researchers like Gabe Brown and David Montgomery have determined that the soil health in the US is so bad that the produce that's being yielded from that soil has 12.5% the nutrient density as our grandparents' fruit did when they were eating it.
That's crazy.
Which for those of you that understand fractions, that's 1/8. And that would be like, so if you have, say, if you're a parent and you're trying to get your child to, be healthier, work out more, be more active, lose weight, they effectively have to eat 6 to 7 times more content in order to actually get the nutrient density that they need to be able to grow. Like that, I mean, that's the conclusion that I make, because I'm just like, because if you think about it, the produce that's being yielded from the soil, that includes corn and all this other stuff, and that's being used to feed the livestock.
And ethanol.
Yeah.
Right.
Which you and that goes back to oil.
Right.
And like when the soil is in such a poor condition, you need fertilizers for those crops to grow.
Right. Yeah. So I think he's talked about. I'm sorry. This is gonna. Actually, no. I'm not sorry. I don't care. It's going to go into, or we're talking about some of the soil issues. They're not doing kind of the cyclical cropping, right? Like where you grow corn. I mean,
there
year,
is.
You give it
there's
a break,
there's some of that,
right? But
it's not regenerative agriculture,
right. So, and that also ties to some of the solar stuff. Now, Texas is not as big of an issue because that is not really cropland out there, but it probably used to be back in the day. It has no utilization for that now because of how shitty it is. But that's part of what might come. And not to go conspiracy theory or even talk about movies too much, but like Interstellar.
Yep.
That's basically what happened in that, right? Was that they couldn't grow any crops.
Yields less, and then all of a sudden all you can do is grow corn.
Right. And it's like, man, just you run into these type of issues, and there's a lot of...
It's something that's been... It's a systemic issue. It's gone so far and for so many generations now, since like really, what, 50s, 60s?
Well, it could actually goes back farther. So like I need to do my due diligence and go back and get the individual's name. But for one of my articles in the research, I found that there was a philosopher, I can't remember his name, but there was a philosopher that identified that while everybody looking at the Roman Empire blamed it on strictly like the currency clipping, there's an effect that was downstream of that actually caused the tipping point, in his opinion. And that was because like everybody, like guys think about the Roman Empire once a day or whatever. There was like, because like everybody talks about the meme as far as like the bread and circuses, right, to placate the population.
I don't know that meme.
You don't know that meme?
No.
So like the whole kind of meme was that while the Roman Empire was withering away, they had their armies so stretched out and so thinned out that they started like clipping the currency to make the currency go farther. You'd take out a little chunk and then bring it together, smelt it together, get more coins out of that. In order to kind of placate the population and kind of ignore the issues that were coming out of the currency debasement, they brought back the Colosseum. They brought back the Colosseum, and then they would provide free bread within the Colosseum to not only keep people satiated, but then also satiated by keeping them entertained.
Entertain them. Yeah.
Problem.
It's with the new Sphere in Las Vegas.
Yep.
Yeah, dude.
It's a distraction.
Problem.
Man,
so
I think it's dope.
The really crazy problem that came out of that is that in order to supply the bread, they were pushing the farmers to overfarm their land. And then this particular philosopher identified that like the sand, the ground that they were farming was turned to sand, and then they could no longer produce the bread to keep the population satiated. And then that's what allowed the entire thing to come crashing down.
Wow.
Now, so let's like I get accused of being a doomer all the time. Let's talk about like
I would never say that about you, Mike.
let's talk about
I feel like we all need a conspiracy theory hat right now. We need a tinfoil hat for all three of us.
Well, let's talk about like the solutions real quick, because I was thinking about it on the way over here. Like, so solution A is going to be oil, regardless of whether you're talking about nuclear or like natural gas for power generation and like reliability and stability. You're going to need oil to build the infrastructure to provide the irrigation systems to produce regenerative agriculture, like systems or cycles out within the Midwest, right? Like, because like one thing with like regenerative ag is that you need not only, because like you need to essentially build an ecosystem on your land to where you have a berm with like shrubbery and trees and everything to facilitate the birds that are going to eat the pests. The pests are the ones that are eating the crop, right? You need that kind of whole ecosystem to satisfy itself or to maintain itself. And then the benefit of that kind of ecosystem is that you're also making sure that the soil is like nice and dense and dark, right? Because that holds a lot more water. Then you don't need to dump as much water onto the crop to maintain it to get your yield out of it. And then by doing all of that, then you have a more nutrient dense, potent yield that's a higher quality product, right? Like that's a kind of solution to get back to like building America up. That's like a literal grassroots foundational system to start building America back up. But you're not going to do it with a fiat system that doesn't want to like identify or acknowledge these problems.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I don't know. I think that goes to kind of, and I'm definitely like a capitalist, but there's a balance of kind of people's morality that I think needs to play in on what you're willing to do to make
this ties into the pharmaceutical industry. I don't know if you've realized if y'all were on Netflix, but in the last like 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, last month, they have dropped 3 shows or movies vilifying. They're going hard after pharmaceuticals. So I don't know if there's some money behind Netflix or something, but they did the one at Purdue Pharma. They did this one, Pain Hustlers. And then even the Fall of the House of Usher, the old Edgar Allan Poe story that has been modernized. The House of Usher was a pharmaceutical family.
Well, dude,
right? And so
I'm convinced they are like Satan incarnate. You know what I mean? I despise them.
But that also goes hand in hand with who facilitates it.
Right.
Insurance companies.
Right. Oh, it's a big old
so like the
circle
whole healthcare system is very incestuous and
well, even calling it a healthcare
point.
system is just a lie to the population in general.
Yeah.
It's a symptom management system. Like you're not actually solving the underlying problem. We're just going to make sure you feel okay.
Right. Well, enough to the point to where you keep coming back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Rent seeking.
Yeah.
There was something else that I also wanted to bring. Oh, have you guys looked, speaking of just like all of the problems that we've touched on and fascism, and let's get into communism a little bit real quick. Have you guys looked into the background of like the kind of green initiative projects?
Well, I mean, I've heard about it. I haven't looked into it, but
Is that a specific product? Are you talking about
So there's two.
macro?
Greenpeace, which is the one that
Mhm.
the Bitcoin community knows very well now.
Yeah.
Greenpeace was founded in the 70s, I believe in 1971, which if you're an individual has visited the website, What the Fuck Happened in 1971, that should, ring some
Mhm.
bells, or you understand that the whole Richard Nixon
I
and
was
the
gonna say,
gold window.
The gold standard was removed.
A communist couple founded Greenpeace in 1971. And then there's another green initiative that was founded in the 90s after the Cold War by Mikhail Gorbachev. So like just looking at these like the lengths that the environmental like catastrophists have gone to the point of using such nonsensical strategies as throwing oil products that they had to purchase onto oil paintings
Yeah.
to try and protest oil while they're wearing products that are produced from oil.
Yeah.
Like that whole just like nonsensical cyclicality and just like ironic relationship. There's just more people need to like have their eyes opened up to that.
And I think that the problem we have, and why I'm kind of, I guess, a doom and gloom guy, is that you reach this point where people are not going to change sides. You know what I mean? They're more concerned about being able to claim that they're right than they are about the truth.
Dogmatic.
Yeah. And so you get to a situation where it doesn't matter what the facts are, because it's like the ultimate easy way to point out the hypocrisy that people live with.
Yeah.
But they don't care. And that's because we talked about this on the other one, in my opinion anyway, they don't have enough real problems in their life. You know what I mean? Like things have gotten to a point where they're not dealing with a day-to-day issue that requires their attention for them to kind of get out of a situation that is a truly...
Reality hasn't checked them yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for that to change, it would require something catastrophic to happen. And we're at a scale now to where something that would be catastrophic enough to happen is going to be catastrophic for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how it gets better. Like, and that's not to be a doom and gloom, dude. It's just I'm a realist.
You think about I think about recent crisis that we've had, right? And so you think about obviously COVID and the good and bad that's kind of come out of that, and how it's pushed us into the world's different one way or another, right? And I think a lot of ways it's kind of a good way. But then also you look at like Uri, right? And particularly locally here in Houston, right? I didn't have power for 4 days at my house. And I think it woke a lot of people up to like, oh shit, this stuff is not like, it's not just like
guaranteed.
I was like flicking the lights and it always comes on, or I always have heat. So I think that you just need need some more crisis
to that.
But even the problem though is, even on that scale, that was a regional issue, right? As a statewide, well, we're a very conservative state, and so you kind of have a more uniform thinking. But if you look at us as a country, think about it like this: Biden went over to Israel, right? What, 2 weeks ago, or whatever?
Sure.
A week ago, whatever it was.
I've made it a point to block all activity that with regards to what's going on over
there. I'm not taking a position either way, because I'm like, I almost feel like we don't know what's truly going on. Like the media, you cannot trust a word.
You can tell
the only thing we know is that the one thing for certain is the only thing war guarantees is death.
Innocent people are dying.
Right. And innocent people that don't get to make the decisions about what happens on either side are the ones that suffer the most.
Well, you can particularly, it's been a glaringly educative series of events the last couple of weeks of how many people truly did not learn from the Ukraine situation.
Right. I
It's
agree.
a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But
we're hitting all the Google SEO like checklist.
Yeah, I know. There's going to be all kinds. We're going to get good listenership on this one, but crap. What was I going to say? Damn it.
Biden and Israel.
Oh yeah. Okay. Think back to 9/11, and again, I've got my own feelings about some of that, which have changed over time. But yeah, right. Here we go, conspiracy theory.
Foil to the foil.
Yes, but regardless, the country did come together during that time, and it felt good. Like I remember being like, "Wow, we're all on the same team."
Yep.
If something had
for about
happened,
2 weeks,
right?
Yeah.
Well, it lasted a little bit longer than that.
You were older than me. I don't remember.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, you were like 10, bro.
Yeah,
right?
I was. Yeah.
I
wasn't
was
born
like
yet.
21, 20, something like that. So yeah, but I remember like it was nice to feel like, wow, like we're a country. We have differences of opinions, but like
we're all moving into the same direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Say something had happened to Biden over there would not have been a uniform reaction from a country standpoint. Like, and that to me, when
I think it would have descended into chaos because I feel like he's already he's senile. He's a puppet,
dude,
right? And so like you've already saw with like the Speaker of the House debacle. Like I think that would be on a much larger scale.
Oh my god,
there might be a coup for power.
Well, and I think just from the population, from the constituency of America, like it would be chaos there too. Like
and bringing it back to Bitcoin, then I think that this is why it's the perfect storm now that RFK has announced that he's going independent.
Right.
That if there's anybody who is ever going to get elected as an independent, it would be him at this moment in time.
But he's not going to.
Well,
I wish he could.
Why not?
I wish he would.
Two-party system is the main reason that it wouldn't work. It's just how the two-party system works.
Because that's fake too. I'm gonna really go hard. Like this whole thing is
simulation.
designed to just put you in a camp. They don't give a shit what camp you're in. You know what I mean? They just want you in a camp because it's easy to sell. It's easy to read you. It's easy to control you. It's easy to feed you.
Drive emotionality and dogmatism.
Right. And so they don't care what side we're on because they know just from statistically, you're going to break in. If you got two, it's going to be 50-50 for the most part. And the population of the people in the middle who are like, man, this is all bullshit is so small that it almost doesn't matter. And I can sit here and say, oh, none of this stuff matters. This is all fake. This is all fake. And they can do whatever they want. And me believing that all this is fake actually even plays into their hands. You know what I mean? We're it's a tough spot, man. It's a tough spot.
Well, so like I have effectively taken us down a pretty doomy line of conversation. But there's another thing with regards to the whole like Bitcoin and energy and power distribution and infrastructure thing that I also kind of wanted to talk about with you guys to get your thoughts on. I wrote a paper that is on my website, like right on the homepage is the first thing you see. Like if people want to read it, the website is mikehobart.online. It's super easy. But I wrote a essay talking about how, so one of the problems with energy generation and just power generation, they're technically two different things, right? Because like energy, it can be heat, energy, radiation, oil, whatever. Heat, I said heat, but and then power generation is utilizing energy to produce specifically electricity, right? The interesting thing that I think that everybody in the world should be particularly having their eyes opened up to is when we look at, one thing that doesn't take a whole lot to or a very big leap for people to grasp is that like you take countries that are underdeveloped, like say somebody in Africa or, Central America or South America that isn't modernized, and you bring in modernized energy generation and power distribution strategies, they can leapfrog the whole process that say a country like the US has had to go through for the last 2 centuries, right? Mm-hmm. You leapfrog it. And then like the return on investment for that is like a solo model, which would be like what I referred to in the paper, which is SOLOW. It's a law of diminishing returns curve where you jump up and you get really great returns and it starts to peter off, right? It's no different than working out. Like somebody that's new to working out is going to see massive gains early on and then it's going to peter out because you adapt. A country is no different. It's going to adapt to the amount of power generation and power distribution that it's capable of generating. And then things are going to become ubiquitous and all this other stuff and saturated, and everybody's going to get access to reliable power and all this and whatnot. So the interesting thing is that in this paper that I wrote about, because as I was doing my research, I found out there's really not a whole lot of research out there that talks about the value that energy in general plays into the GDP of a country. Think about that. When we're talking about the effectiveness and the economic penetration and generation of a country, energy is really just not.
Yeah, but it should be, because you look at it, the ones that have highest GDP, they probably are energy producers.
Yeah, like whether
Us,
Yeah,
Saudi Arabia,
right. All the Middle East.
whether you're a country or just like a human being, if you want to grow and succeed, you need energy. Energy is the stuff of life. Like,
yeah.
And I have a whole other thing that I could bring up with you guys if you want after this about life and energy. But the fact that energy generation and power distribution isn't even being considered in economic models. So like we're not even looking at how effective or how reliant we are on energy generation towards the GDP of a country is just completely broken in general.
Yeah.
Like they in these researchers or in these research papers, which is Stern and Candor, they had one in 2012 and I think one in 2015 or 2016 that were referenced in the paper. They even they mention in the research paper, like they basically say there isn't shit here. Like nobody's looking into it because like when it comes to like bigger countries, like Jake mentioned, they're just assuming that energy generation is reliable and it's saturated and it's there, which is like, you can't do that. Cause like, especially when you're incorporating the whole renewable thing into the conversation, that's actually making, thanks to ERCOT, like them having their own system, we're now finding out that like bringing on too much renewable generation actually weakens the entire grid, right? Because
of the reliability issues, right?
Yeah. And the reason I brought this up is that like we need all of our like state legislators and like our congressmen, our senators, our like the House of Representatives. We need every single individual to get educated on this, because if we want the U.S. to avoid a Roman Empire thing, we need energy. Like we need a lot of it. We need we need like the cheapest power we can get, the most reliable power we can get, because cheap and reliable power is how you facilitate innovation. Like if you're paying for $1 a kilowatt hour, ain't nobody doing shit. Right. Like you're just doing the very bare basics just to get by. And Bitcoin mining facilitates that to like in every direction. Yeah. Like we talked about oil and gas, nuclear is the perfect pairing for Bitcoin mining. When you have something that can like consistently run like perpetual demand that doesn't have to fluctuate. Right. That is a highly competitive market, which is constantly like the energy consumption of these ASICs is just down and to the right, like consistently. Yeah, it's just straight down.
Yeah, it's remarkable watching what some of them can do, like the joules on that compared to even 3 years ago. Yeah, you know what I mean.
There was I can't remember who shared it on Twitter, but somebody had made a chart like detailing like how many joules per terahash, and it was like when it like 10 years ago, I think it was like double-digit thousands joules per terahash, and now we're down into like 20,
like 20, 23, something like that. It's very, very low.
So
very
low. So with energy generation, like you have this capability of like, say for like we have to get new nuclear projects up and running like as fast as possible, like not as fast as possible, but as fast as safely possible, right? And so like, and one of the things I like to talk about is like you have a new nuclear project coming on, whether it's like a full reactor like 2 gigawatts, or it's like a small modular reactor, which are going to start deploying in the next like 4 years from Westinghouse. Regardless of whichever one you choose, you can build it with Bitcoin mining. You can build it anywhere. Because like you're going to have like cooling towers. So you need to have the water source, right? So you have a spot. It doesn't need to be like really, really close to like any sort of like local population center or anything. You just put like Bitcoin miners on site with it to provide the demand to allow the nuclear reactor to run at whatever percentage capacity you want it to run at. Yeah. And then it's earning a revenue, and then you can have the infrastructure tied in later and people can build up around it.
So to that point, and I've mentioned this on the show before, so I apologize for anybody who's had to hear this already, but I was in Dubai and I'd met with a guy who's a nuclear engineer, and he told me they would be mining Bitcoin if Bitcoin was worth zero for the reason because of the load capability and bringing it up and down. It's the safest way to bring a nuclear facility offline or online. Yes. It literally is the size of the load that it can handle and the speed at which you can do that and kind of control down is second to none. There's
Yep.
nothing like it. So yeah, I think the more people start to understand energy, because honestly, man, like before I got into oil and gas, I'm from Missouri. Like we did not have an oil and gas industry really.
Yeah. Same with Iowa.
Yeah. Nobody talks about that stuff. Like you don't even know what to talk about. And
Yeah.
so when you get into it, like when I moved down here and then I started working in oil and gas, it's like, oh wow. And then when I got into Bitcoin mining, it really expanded on it. But it's such a simple concept when you start understanding how Bitcoin mining works.
Yep.
To see the jump towards what it can actually do.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about is the same thing I talk about like with El Salvador and Africa and all these places where you need reliable power for basic human needs, you know what I mean, that people don't have. We talk about here, like you're talking about it, to extend the kind of dominance of America, which is good, and we're all proponents of. But even in other areas, it's like just to basically allow people to have access to reliable power from whatever source, using small nuclear reactors. SMRs are like, that is going to be a game changer to me, because you are able to basically go develop areas that, number one, would not normally ever get it, because for a multitude of reasons, the country might not have the GDP or the economic stability or situation where they could actually go build out, apply some of their capital or their GDP to building out grid infrastructure when they don't even have the generation capabilities. So it's like, that's where SMRs to me too are like, this will change entire countries.
Oh, this will change the world.
Yeah.
Because when you get to that point,
Mhm.
when you have these smaller, lesser capable countries right now, like realizing this and starting to execute on it,
Yeah.
then when you have reliable and supplyable power, you allow for the cost of living to come down, the standard of living to go up, right? Which is, with the amount of people that are virtue signaling about caring about everybody across the planet, that should be something you care about.
Right.
And then there's also a conversation point of like, so Great American Mining, like I was pretty heavily black pilled as far as like for oil, like in that sense of black pilled. I was like, oh yeah, all oil, like all this. And then since they got acquired by Crusoe and I got cut free, I've been kind of just like looking at just energy generation broader.
Yeah.
Like we just need energy generation.
Right.
But so like we've been, you know, crapping on renewables. There's also a thing where renewables need Bitcoin mining too.
Yes, absolutely.
Because like their problem with regards to wind or solar is like the whole duck bill problem, right? Like they tend to produce peak power outside of the peak demand window. So that means that they're almost constantly curtailing.
Yeah.
Right? Because like the economics don't work out. So the projects that are up and running now that aren't completely like dilapidated, throw Bitcoin miners on there, provide the demand, allow the project to earn revenue and keep running.
Right.
Then if the grid needs the power that you're generating,
you send it down.
Then curtail and redirect the flow of electrons.
Yeah. I mean, it's the simple concept that we talk about all the time, and it's inevitable because it is simple and it is real. But you know, it's until it's widely known within those groups that this is not only an acceptable route to go, but a functional and a great utility for them to utilize to extend the life of projects. I've talked about with oil and gas wells as well. I mean, you literally can extend the economic life of a well through Bitcoin mining.
Yep.
You can make wells that normally wouldn't have been economic through Bitcoin mining. Same with these wind and solar projects. I have talked to multiple wind groups in particular that have old kind of dilapidated facilities that like they're on the verge of shutting down, where it's like, well, you could extend the life of this by another 4 or 5 years by going to a miner and utilizing what you have left to sell electricity to them and then curtail. Same scenario you just laid out. And they're starting to understand it, but it's like, it's almost this two-way street where they got to know that Bitcoin's real and they got to know that how this works. And I have noticed over the last year in particular, groups that I was talking to back in 2020 about this are now circling back to me now and wanting to talk about opportunities. And
Yeah.
so,
which is awesome.
right. And it shows the education of it. And in fact, I was talking to another guy who, he invested, and not NJ, he bought some containers from us back in the day. And he's, kind of a finance guy, investor, institutional type investor. And I had a talk with him the other day just to catch up. And he brought up, I asked him specifically, like, how are people viewing in the institutional world that you come from? He's out in, West Coast area. What is it like now compared to 3 years ago when we first started talking to you? And he's like, it's completely different. Like everybody, the conversation is not around the viability or legitimacy of Bitcoin anymore. It's around the projects and what's the right project, what's the right timing, things like that.
Shopping.
Right. It's not any longer, is this bullshit? You know what I mean? It's, okay, let's talk about what project we pick out of these lists. So
that's awesome.
It's wonderful to hear because, and it also, I think that's what over time will lead to less volatility. That and market cap size. Like I think just naturally when the market cap continues to grow, you're still going to have booms and busts.
It's a commodity. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a commodity, but I think you're going to see the reduction in the swings that you have. You know what I mean?
Where more of like a slow build kind of trend.
Right. Yeah. Right. And because like oil and gas is not as volatile as it was, 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
That's not something I would know. So that's good to know.
Yeah. Like you're still going to have these booms and busts. You're just going to, but I think they get reduced over time. Demand is growing. And so it's like, it's going to be harder to have just these vast long-term debt, like down at the bottom. And plus you got companies that can hedge, right? And so they're not going to just completely leave the market. I've been surprised at how many miners have continued to grow the hash rate despite the mining economics.
That's been something that has been crazy. I've been saying it for a couple years now. I'm like, you look at that hash rate chart, and I'm very confident that there's obviously going to be private participants, but I'm growing more and more confident that while I've been more correct than I thought, that there have been countries privately, secretly, using Bitcoin mining to facilitate their infrastructure.
I agree. I think that's where a lot of it's coming from. It has to.
Because like I wrote an article for Simply Bitcoin earlier this year, like back in like January. Like there was a like a meaningful little dip in the hash rate. I think it was like 10% or something, and then it bounced back up really quickly. That amount that it corrected for was equal to a 2 gigawatt nuclear reactor just mining Bitcoin.
Jeez.
Like that's a lot of power.
That's a lot. That is a lot. And don't get me wrong, oil and gas is still volatile. It always will be, but I'm just saying, because I mean, what, three years ago we were, 3.5, I guess we were, we had negative prices. So like, it does happen.
Well, and nat gas hit like what, like $6 or something at one point, and then crashed back down to 2.
Went up to like 9.
Yeah,
it was crazy. That was it was funny because I had left oil and gas. Well, I didn't really leave it, but I was working at J, and it's like, man, $9 natural gas sucks. But like, man, the whole time I was working oil and gas, like, oh gosh, what I would give to have $9 natural gas. But well, look, dude, I'm glad you came on. I'm glad we got you on here finally.
This is a fun little riff.
Yeah, man, it's fun. It's a good time, and I enjoy it. I like having, I'm sure that Jake probably was like, man, these guys are getting deep on this freaking
going all over
crazy conspiracies. But I don't know, man. Conspiracy there's a reason they're there. So we'll have to turn the camera off when we talk about some more of these. But yeah, dude, thanks for showing up, and
thanks for inviting me.
We need to stay in touch. And what are your plans? What are you doing next? You gonna keep riding? I'm
gonna keep riding for sure.
Back in the industry in some capacity.
Yeah, I definitely aggressively want to get back in the industry. One thing that I'll tell you, and I'll tell anybody that's trying to get into like any Bitcoin industry, whether it's like helping a company build an app or getting into Bitcoin mining, like you definitely want to if you're gonna get into this, like you need to really put in as much effort as you can to contribute to the survivability and
Right.
the track record of your company or your project. Because if that employment opportunity goes away, it's gonna taint you having to go back into like the fiat job market.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, man.
you start to reassess everything. And it's like,
Yeah.
nope, this is a scam. This is a scam. Like this product is completely bunk. Like this is
Yeah.
like you just you judge the world in a completely different
Once
manner.
you put on the glasses, man, you can't take them
Yeah.
off. It's just the reality.
But I'm also working on producing a book.
Oh, nice.
Specifically to argue like the value that like Bitcoin provides to a society.
Mm.
Because I'm sure you and the listeners have probably determined I like looking at very complicated systems and relationships. And in this book, I'm looking to compare looking at complex adaptive systems and then looking at a body and a country and how they're very much the very same operation and relationship. Like a body needs ATP that is an unmanipulatable high energy like density source of power for like all the cells in your body to to work together as an economy. Country is no different.
Yeah.
Like if you when you put in an energy input into a country that isn't true, like a fiat dollar, inflammation and complications start to build up all throughout the system like cancers.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
And
You
that's
look
and
at
that's a
that.
problem.
Right. That's interesting, man. When's that going to be ready, you think?
Ooh, I've got an initial draft of the manuscript now. But like with all the different projects, I'm working on trying to help as many Bitcoin companies as I can. Hopefully I can get it all edited and pushed off to like an actual like professional editor friend of mine to look at in the next couple of weeks.
Nice, dude. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to let me get an early copy, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Well, thanks, dude. I'm glad you showed up. I'm glad we could work it out. But
yeah,
anytime we'll do it again.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to you guys hosting meetups here in Houston.
Yes, we're hosting meetups here at the studio. Well, not at the studio, but in the building. Last Thursday of the month.
Yep.
So
thanks a lot, man.
Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to the next one.
All right, man. Thank you. Later, y'all.